Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action.
Hey everybody, welcome to In the Red Zone, presented by BetUS.com. Sean Brown, Michael Johnson here, and it is time for Week 8 picks for college football. But before we do that, we need you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed. Hit that like button and always leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And then go ahead and go over and check out BetUS.com, every bettor's favorite sports book. They got all kinds of perks. You can use the promo code REDZONE to get some free play there. Go place your bets with BetUS. Okay, Sean, it's time to get to Week 8 picks, but before we do that, we're going to discuss Week 7, because we do that every week. And we have to start out with the elephant that has left the room. Tennessee upsets Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama was an 8-point favorite. It was a heck of a game. You and I both sit here last week and said, probably going to come down to the last possession, and it did. It was a tremendous game to watch. You know, they storm the field. They carry the goalpost down Main Street afterwards. I mean, who does that? So,
and for everybody saying, you know, number 6 team in the country storms the field. Listen, Tennessee had not beaten Alabama since 2006. You got to think, context matters in this situation. Sure, they're the number 6 team, play like it, but they haven't played like it the last decade plus.
Right.
You know, so in 2015, 14, they got some really good recruiting classes, and they thought they were going to be good, and they kind of fell on their face.
It was only a few years ago, we're sitting here calling them the dumpster fire of college football.
Right.
I mean, because they were.
Yeah.
And
do you need to get that?
No, that's all right. We're gonna pass that for a second. That's my mom calling, so got to tell mom chill out for a minute. So we got a show to shoot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're right. They haven't. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And so I don't have an issue with them storming the field.
I don't
Celebrate the win. I think.
Yeah.
Now I will say this:
don't do it every Kansas is storming the field every week.
Yeah, that's getting a little ridiculous.
Right. On a big game like that, where the number 1, number 2 team in the country comes in, and you haven't had a big win like that in forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go enjoy it. Go celebrate. These kids, these college kids, these fans, they're not robots. It just, I don't know. I don't mind the storm in the field. I get it if you've been good for a while, there's a top 10 matchup. Yeah, don't go storm the field after you've been there for a while. But Tennessee is coming back to the top of the mountain, and we love it.
Last thing I'm going to mention about this, we had somebody comment already about, it's a Tennessee fan, mad that Ohio State's number 2 and that Tennessee is at 3. Ohio State hasn't played anybody. Listen, Ohio State has been dominant for years.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in the top 4 every year. They've got the number 1 scoring offense in college football, the number 2 total offense behind Tennessee.
Yeah.
But they've not been doing nothing but winning, and they've been dominating. It's not like they've had close games.
Right.
Georgia had a close game with Missouri. Ohio State has not had that.
Yeah.
They beat Notre Dame week 1, 21-10, which Notre Dame does not look like that impressive of a win now. But they got games coming up. They play Iowa this week, one of the best defenses in college football. They still have to play Michigan. They still have to play Penn State. They still have a Big Ten championship game. I mean, they're going to play games. And for Tennessee fans, listen, you're on top right now. You still have Georgia. You still have Kentucky. There's no guarantee you're even going to make the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
So I think you need to chill out for a second. I think you just need to stay in your lane, enjoy the win, stay in your lane, and if you win out, you're going to get your shot.
You'll be in,
Yeah, you'll get your shot. But, you got to focus on winning and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing.
Tennessee now has probably the best win on their resume.
Yep.
Out of really any, but you got to stack games. You got to stack games. You got to stack seasons if you want to be. If you want to get that win and be catapulted to number 1 or number 2.
Yeah.
But Ohio State has roots. They have a foundation. Tennessee, I can understand if some voters are a little bit hesitant to go ahead and put them in the number 1 or the number 2 spot.
Right.
Nobody wants to look foolish. If that was just listen, that was a hard-fought game. That was an incredible game.
Alabama this year has not been playing like the old Alabama.
Right.
They haven't. I mean, yes, they got a 1-point win over Texas. They struggled with Texas A&M in a game they really should have blown. Texas A&M is not very good this
Yeah.
year. So, let's put this win in perspective. Plus, I'll say this. Nick Saban teams, boy, I feel sorry for the rest of the SEC West because usually when they lose one game, they come back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
They're likely going to win the SEC West because I really think they'll beat Ole Miss. They're going to be in the SEC championship game. And if Tennessee meets Alabama again in the SEC championship game at a neutral site, Alabama's going to whip Tennessee. I really believe so. So I think, it's all about perspective. Nick Saban, he doesn't need to apologize for anything. The guy's the GOAT. He's the greatest coach of all time. He's allowed to lose every once in a while.
Yeah.
And, remember back Tom Brady when he was 38 years old and he'd lose a game. Oh, it's the end of his career. He's on the downslide. And 7 years later, he's still dominating the NFL.
Yeah.
Nick Saban's still going to be dominating college football 10 years from now. This is not some downslide for him. He's going to bounce back. He's the greatest of all time for a reason. So, Nick, sleep good. Don't worry about it. You'll bounce back.
It's interesting because, Josh Heupel was.
I'm going to drink my Pepsi. They're not a sponsor. But
Yeah.
My Pepsi.
You might have to blur that out. So Josh Heupel was the offensive coordinator the year that Trevor Knight was went and was the Sugar Bowl MVP against Alabama, and so he knows a thing or two about going up against a Nick Saban team. Hopefully, for a few years, that we get some good Tennessee-Alabama battles. That'd be a lot of fun.
All right, let's switch gears real quick. Let's do about 3 to 4 minutes tops. Oklahoma bounces back. They beat Kansas by 10. They were a 7-point favorite. We missed that pick. They're just a totally different offense with Dylan Gabriel, but their defense is still terrible.
Who knew you needed a quarterback?
Yeah, right.
Especially in the Big 12.
Yeah.
They're a completely different team with Dylan Gabriel back there. And we've said it before, so we're not going to get too far into it, but, they just don't really have anybody behind him that can throw the ball very well or run Jeff Lebby's offense. Yeah. It's one or the other. Like maybe there's another talented arm on the team, but they haven't picked up the offense quickly. Yes, the defense needs a lot of work. They did some things that were really, really good. Mm-hmm. They remained aggressive on first down, which they hadn't been doing against TCU, against Texas. Their defensive line was just stagnant during that Texas game a week ago. So I was really impressed. Eric Gray looks like one of the best running backs in the country. I mean, when he gets going, there was one play, if you watch the game, there was one play where he ran like a 20 to 30-something yard touchdown up the left, and it got called back for a holding. And then he did the same exact thing. Just would not be denied. He saw the goal line and thought, I'm getting across that. Yeah. So, they left some points out there on the field. Could have easily gotten over 60 on a couple of different things. But I was really impressed with the way Dylan Gabriel came back, just had a great game. And so I'm pleasantly pleased. Yep. And it was Kansas, but listen, it was number 19 Kansas, one-loss Kansas.
Who still scored 42.
Right.
And you score 42, you should win the game.
Yeah.
So
and this is a different Kansas. We're seeing it's a different day and age in college football where Tennessee, Kansas, Florida State is better than what they've been.
North Carolina,
Duke. A lot of teams are starting to pull in some talent that they haven't had over the years. So I think that's why you're seeing a lot more parity. Yep. And why you're seeing Alabama just not completely dominating, because some of those players aren't going to Alabama. They're going to Tennessee, or they're going to, maybe not Kansas, but they're going to some of those other schools.
Oklahoma State, TCU. We picked TCU. They just barely covered, but they did. They win double overtime.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State in the second overtime just had a bad offensive sequence. They had to take a field goal, and you just kind of knew watching that game, there was just Oklahoma State's defense was not going to stop TCU.
Yeah.
So TCU gets the win in overtime. Mike Gundy in overtime games against top 25 teams or top 10 teams, 1-5.
Ooh.
So not a good record for Mike Gundy. And going back, I'll mention again, we talked about it last week, Mike Gundy on his radio show, it's just kind of telling. He said that week 7, week 8, week 6, 7, 8, right around in there, your young guys, your freshmen, first year,
this
is where they start mentally breaking down. They want to stay focused. They're trying to put in the effort, but really they just can't do it. Fourth quarter, you started seeing Oklahoma State slip a lot. And it's young players who make mistakes. And I think you see it across college football. This is the time of year when you really get upsets because you get first-year guys or young guys who make a lot of mistakes. I think that happened with Oklahoma State. But I still think, I still think those are the top two teams in the Big 12, TCU and Oklahoma State. They played it right down to the wire because they're almost dead even as far as talent goes. I think it was just a tremendous game. And I anticipate a rematch in the Big 12 championship game between these two teams at a neutral site, and then we'll see what happens with that.
It definitely could. So their defensive front is really good. It's actually kind of the boon of their defense. But I did want to see. I'm trying to see where they're ranked as far as. I'm not going to get too far into it. I just wanted to see where like their pass defense was. Because I know that their defensive front is really, really good.
But they're giving up a lot in the secondary.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to see. If there's a discrepancy between pass defense and run defense, you can't be one-dimensional on defense and win these big games like that.
And Max Dugan's making he's making a case for being in one of the top guys in the finalists for a Heisman. I mean
the guy,
he's getting there.
The guy, comes from Kansas State, and I mean, we've talked about this before, and then Chandler Morris transfers over to TCU. So Duggan takes a back seat to Chandler Morris. Morris gets hurt in that first game, and then Duggan just does everything he needs to do to win every game. Even if Chandler Morris comes back healthy, you got to think, keep going with Duggan until you have a reason not to.
Right.
That's Duggan's job.
It's almost like in the NFL, Dallas Cowboys. Why would you go away with Cooper Rush while you're winning?
Yeah.
I know you have Dak Prescott, but ride that. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. If you're winning, stay with it. So you're right. Last one we'll talk about: USC Utah. Smiling on your face. It had.
No.
And listen,
I tell you, when we get to this table, I try to take all hatred for Lincoln Riley out of here.
Well, listen.
I'm smiling because of what kind of game it was.
It was
incredible.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
It was a tremendous game. And so at one point, Utah, you had that helmet dislodge the ball and a fumble on the 2.
Yeah.
But they were going in.
Yeah.
And leading up to that, I mean, it was like they showed the graphic during the game. The 6 drives, touchdown, 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 fumble, touchdown, touchdown. They would have scored there. They would have covered. Utah was clearly the better team here. Caleb Williams crying after the game. Look, he's emotional. Not saying anything negative against him. You can do that. I'm never happy to see a player upset like that. But I absolutely was ecstatic that Lincoln Riley lost this game. And I don't care if I'm biased or whatever. But
Dalton Kincaid, for the tight end that had a huge game for Utah, he was emotional too. Yeah. It was just a hard-fought game. Right. Like, I'm not going to sit here and make fun of Caleb Williams for crying. Like. Right. That kid lives and breathes football. Sure. Yep. I mean, he just is such a competitor. He's so confident out there.
And him going to USC was about him making what he felt was the best choice for him.
Sure, yeah.
So you can't blame him for doing that at all.
I don't hate on him for
or
leaving.
Jordan Addison, who unfortunately got hurt.
Your coach leaves, and now you're like, what's going on? We talked at length about this whole thing, but USC fans, I don't hate Caleb Williams. Yep. I have a strong dislike for Lincoln Riley for the way he left and what he tried to do on his way out. But yeah, it was just such a good game. Yeah. I felt like it was the best game of the day.
It was,
even though Alabama and Tennessee came down to what it came down to. And I told you guys, if you were watching that game, I told you Utah fans come to play.
They do.
I mean, they make
Absolutely.
a huge difference, and it's not a huge. Let me see.
And Tyrone, while you're looking that up, Tyrone Whittingham, head coach at Utah, he's been there like 18 years. He's been there since Urban Meyer left, and he's done nothing but win. Yeah. He took over when they were not in the Pac-12, not a Power 5 school, and they just continue to be. And then we talked about it beforehand. Cam Rising, another should be a Heisman contender. It's incredible what this kid does.
Everything he needed to do, he did. Yeah. So if they needed a first down, he got a first down. Yeah. If Dalton Kincaid's running a crossing route for a first down. He's dumping it off there. It just, and you could see it before it even happened. And then, Cam Rising takes off, gets the edge and just makes a guy miss. He's such a savvy runner. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that about him. I knew he was a dual threat quarterback. But then, watching him go to Texas and then now transfer to Utah, it's just like, man, I'm wishing he would have kept his commitment to OU and ended up playing for OU.
He's a special quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't see very many long balls. It seems like the ones that he did throw deep were just right on the money. Mm-hmm. His intermediate passes were incredible. His short passes were incredible. It just he was my what do we want? MVP of the week.
We're going to start that new. Each week we're each going to pick a Red Zone MVP of the week. Yours is Cam Rising?
Mine's Cam Rising, yeah.
I have to, I would...
Impressive performance.
I would agree with you on Cam Rising, although I just want to be different. I want to throw a shout out to somebody else. Drake May at North Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, North Carolina was losing that whole game. Duke had that game, and he brings his team back. They get the win. They didn't cover, but they get the win, and I've just been impressed with him all year long.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of players out there we could give an MVP award to. But it just stood out to me. Hendon Hooker's another one for Tennessee. That
unless you're putting up insane numbers your freshman year, you're probably not going to win the Heisman. Right. But if you have a really good freshman year and then build on that in your sophomore year, that's huge for getting eyes on you nationally to be able to get the votes for the Heisman.
Right.
So he's making a case not just for this year but for his career. Somewhere along that lines, he'll be in New York, a part of the top 3 or 4 guys that get invited to that. So for my MVP of the week was Cam Rising. He was 30 of 44, 415 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, a QBR of 92.5, and he had 11 rushes for 60 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground.
Pretty impressive.
Just what a performance.
Really quickly before we're going to give you our updated who we think are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
We'll do that. But beforehand, a couple other close games that were really interesting. We don't need to discuss them, but Iowa State, Texas went down to the wire. Like I said, Duke, North Carolina. There were a few other ones. There were just a lot of great games to sit and watch if you could watch them all. So that was great. Okay, here's the deal.
James Madison gets beat.
James Madison,
their first week
against Georgia Southern,
the top 25, and they get beat by 7.
But Georgia Southern is the team that beat Nebraska earlier this year. Georgia Southern was like 3-9 last year.
At MAC,
man. And they've turned it around using the transfer portal. So I mean, and hey, we've been asked about it. Listen, South Alabama and James Madison, both teams that are this week. We're going to be picking those games, so stay tuned. But real quick, before let's finish up this segment with we had 3 undefeated top 10 teams go down this week.
Yeah.
And it shuffles everything up. The new AP poll was out, and you have Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee at 3, Michigan, Clemson,
then Alabama,
and then Alabama and TCU at 7, I believe.
Ole Miss, and then TCU at 8.
Ole Miss and TCU at 8. So, okay, we're after week 7 of the season. Give me your top 4. If right now, how you think it's going to finish out in your top 4?
Man, I hope Tennessee keeps continuing to ride and just wins and wins and wins. Josh Heupel's been able to do that at USC. Let's see if he can do it in the SEC. I'm sorry, UCF, not USC. So I would have to say, and in no particular order, so I'm not saying the first team is number 1. So I would say Clemson will be in there. I just think that they have a pretty favorable schedule going forward. I'm going to say Tennessee. I'm going to say that they just have the most momentum I see. Georgia's just kind of hanging around. They're up there. And if some teams, if some more teams start dropping and losing, then this could be another year of 2 SEC teams. It just depends on what comes down to Georgia and Tennessee. But then I would probably put Ohio State in there, and then I'd love to see like UCLA.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if they'll win out. I don't know. They've got USC coming up in a few
got
weeks.
a tough one this week with Oregon.
Yeah, they do have Oregon, which Oregon's already dropped one.
Yeah, but since losing to Georgia, Oregon has been on a tear. So
I've got Clemson, Tennessee, Ohio State. And let's just, I don't know. Because here's the thing. If Tennessee beats Georgia, because it's not possible for both Georgia and Tennessee. It's not possible.
Nope.
Now the whole cross conference, different divisions, that's how it works out for Alabama and Georgia. I'd say Alabama. Let's say Alabama.
Okay. All right, I kind of think when it all shakes out at the end of the day, I think that you're going to have Georgia sitting there at number 1 because, Tennessee next week has UT Martin. That's not a game. But then they get Kentucky at home.
Yeah.
But after Kentucky that following week, they got to go to Georgia. You know how teams kind of look ahead. Mm-hmm. They might trip up against Kentucky. But I think either way, I think Tennessee's going to lose one of those 2 games. So, and I really think it's going to be against Georgia.
Yeah.
So I think Georgia at home is going to beat Tennessee. I think Georgia is a better team. So I think Georgia gets to the SEC championship game. They beat Tennessee along the way, and I think they do beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. So I see Georgia sitting there at number 1 at the end of the season. I think Ohio State is going to win out. They're going to beat Michigan, and they're going to win the Big Ten championship game and be undefeated. They'll be sitting there at number 2. And then now you have a lot of chaos because now you have probably now you have most likely a 1-loss Tennessee, which would get in over a 1-loss. So there is a scenario Georgia and Tennessee could make it, but if Alabama's out. So because you would have a 2-loss Alabama at that point because Alabama loses in the SEC championship game. Tennessee would get in over Alabama in that situation. So I think Georgia, Ohio State, number 1, number 2. Number 3 to me is going to be Clemson. Really the only game they have left that's going to be really tough for them is this week against Syracuse. I think that'll be a close game. But once they do that, I just don't see Clemson losing. So they're sitting there undefeated in the 3 spot. And now you come down to the 4 spot. And to me, it's going to be an argument between a 1-loss Tennessee or a possibly undefeated UCLA or an undefeated TCU. So I think you get 3 teams sitting there and you don't and who's going to go where. It's possible all 3 have 1 loss sitting there. I think the team that's most capable of running the table at this point and being undefeated at the end of the year to get that 4th spot is TCU. I think they have a better chance at finishing undefeated than UCLA because UCLA still has Oregon and they still have USC. And that's going to be very tough to win both of those games. I think that UCLA trips up at some point there. And along the way, I think Ole Miss will lose. So, and even if they made the SEC championship game, a 1-loss Ole Miss is not getting in.
Yeah.
So put me down as Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and I'm going to say TCU gets that 4th spot.
So TCU, they've got a couple of difficult ones left. Mm-hmm. They do have Kansas State coming up this week. Then they've got West Virginia, who might be.
West Virginia's a good team.
They're one of the better 500 teams.
Yes. I said that. That's why I picked them last week, and I said that they would actually beat Baylor because West Virginia's, like I said last week, was the best 2 and 3 team in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, look at who they lost to and how they lost, and I just knew you go to Morgantown. Now, when they go on the road, it might be a different story.
Yeah, so TCU has, they've got 3 home games left. Kansas State, then they go to Morgantown on the 29th, and then they've got Texas Tech at home. They should win that one. They've got Texas at Texas.
That will be tough. That's their toughest game.
That's going to be a tough one. But then they have to go to Waco the very next week to play Baylor.
I don't think that'll be a problem this year.
You don't think so?
I'm not sold on Baylor. Baylor's not as good as they were last year.
But Baylor could bite you at any moment.
They could. They're an upset potential team. I mean, TCU will have to stay focused the whole way through.
Yeah, and then they've got Iowa State for their last regular season game.
And then likely a rematch with Oklahoma State. in
likely.
the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, depending
game.
on what happens with Oklahoma State, they could.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been times where their media people are scratching their heads at some of the decisions Mike Gundy has made.
I kind of think that what is, in my opinion, it's going to be TCU. I think TCU kind of runs the table the rest of the year. They're in the Big 12 championship game, and I think that who they're playing will come down to whoever wins the Kansas State-Oklahoma State game.
Yeah. I mean, if Oklahoma starts playing better and really just showing that 3-game slump was what that was, they could just come through and wreck the whole party because they could beat Oklahoma State, and then you've got Texas in the mix. If Oklahoma State goes down one more time, so we will definitely see because Texas only has one loss in the conference.
Right.
Same with Oklahoma State.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, real quick. Show our sponsors ad, and then we will be back, and we're going to get started on Week 8 picks. So stick around.
Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action.
Okay, welcome back to In the Red Zone, and it is time to get started with Week 8 picks right now. First game, Thursday night, Troy at South Alabama. South Alabama is a 3-point favorite. We have some South Alabama fans who've been saying, hey, what about South Alabama? They've been kind of sliding under the radar in the group of 5, mainly because they do have the one loss.
Yeah.
And in the group of 5, you really don't get a lot of national attention unless you're undefeated. It's just the way it is. I mean, Cincinnati continues to win and dominate since the loss to Arkansas. Nobody's really talking about them. So it's just kind of what it is. But, hey, you know what? They're playing on Thursday night. It's a good game, so we want to pick it. Just a couple quick notes. Gunnar Watson, quarterback for Troy, 1,691 yards, but he's thrown 6 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So turning the ball over, that's not a good ratio. Carter Bradley, quarterback for South Alabama, 1,677 yards, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Both defenses averaging, giving up roughly 20 points per game. And South Alabama, 4th in the country in turnover margins. So they get the ball. You got a Troy offense that has a tendency to turn the ball over. To me, I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a South Alabama by 10 or more. So
normally Alabama. Troy's not sitting there with 5 wins, 6 games through the season. But looking at their schedules, Troy has kind of eked out some wins. They beat Texas State 17-14 just this last weekend. They did beat Southern Miss. They beat them 27-10. They beat Western Kentucky 34-27. They beat Marshall 16-7. They lost to App State, and they've also lost to Ole Miss. And then South Alabama has been putting up some points the last few weeks. So 41 against Louisiana Monroe, and then they had a close game at Louisiana Raging Cajuns, 20-17, and then Louisiana Tech. Man, they've just been playing all Louisiana teams. 38-14. They did lose to UCLA, but they kept that game interesting in losing by 1 point, 32-31.
Yeah, and we know how good UCLA is.
Yeah.
So that's telling there.
And even Central Michigan is pretty decent for what they are. And
they gave Oklahoma State a game.
Yeah, and South Alabama beat them 38-24. So give me South Alabama.
Okay, next one. Iowa is at Ohio State. The Buckeyes are 28-point favorites coming off a bye week. Quick stats here for you. Ohio State's defense, they are 11th in the nation in red zone defense. They've given up two rushing touchdowns to 3 passing touchdowns. Iowa, that's in 11 attempts. Iowa, again, red zone defense, 15 attempts for the team, same two rushing touchdowns, 3 passing. So both teams are really good in red zone defense, and that's 5 touchdowns scored on each team's defense in the red zone in 6 games. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Iowa is the 3rd ranked scoring defense. Ohio State is the 10th ranked scoring defense. Ohio State is the 1st ranked scoring offense in the country. They're the top scoring offense at 48.8 points per game. But Iowa, 127th in the country in scoring offense. Their
wow.
offense is terrible.
Yeah.
They're only scoring 13.5 points per game. And Spencer Petras, their quarterback, he has not even eclipsed 1,000 yards throwing yet. 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 6 games. Terrible. There's a lot going on up there at Iowa. Kirk Ferentz, the head coach, his son is the offensive coordinator, and they are terrible. Everybody's calling for him to be fired. They want him gone. The AD, because Ferentz has been there so long, is sticking by him, and it's just chaos.
He's the longest tenured head coach in college football.
And nobody wants to go to him and say, you got to fire your son.
Right.
That's what it boils down to. But until they do, they're going to continue to struggle.
Well, and that's what happened with Bob Stoops and having his brother, Mike Stoops, as a defensive coordinator, basically running Brent Venables out of town the first time. And then you have Lincoln Riley take over, who was basically told, you keep Mike on the team until he finds something. Well, he didn't find anything. Yeah. And so you're kind of left. And then it got to a point where administration was like, okay, this is way out of hand. We've never had defense this bad. Something's got to change. Yep. So, I get the nepotism part of, and loyalty will get you killed.
It will.
Sports.
Absolutely, it will. Yeah. And so in my opinion, Ohio State has been burning me this year because they never seem to cover when I pick them. However, honestly, they're going to score at least 30. And Iowa, to me, it's a shutout for the Buckeyes because I don't think Iowa can score against Ohio State. I think it's going to be so ugly. The only way they get a touchdown is garbage time in the fourth quarter against Ohio State's threes. I don't see it happening.
They may keep Ohio State to under their average, but they're not going to be able to score to keep up with C.J. Stroud. And they're 3-2-1 against the spread at Ohio State. Iowa is 3-3 against the spread.
And I do think it might be an 18-0, 20-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
It won't be a blowout at halftime, but it will eventually be a blowout. Yeah. So I've got Ohio State covering.
Same here.
Okay. Let's move on to big game. Syracuse against Clemson. At Clemson. Clemson a 14-point favorite. Both teams undefeated. Yeah. Syracuse gets the win against NC State 24-9. Syracuse has been playing good defense. My notes on this one. Okay, so Syracuse, are they 5-0 or 6-0?
They're 6-0.
They've only played 3 decent teams. So what I did was I went ahead and I took out the Wagner or whoever they played. They played some teams that it was clearly stat padding games. Mm-hmm. So I took those out and I did the averages based on what was left over. So against NC State, Purdue, and Virginia, which would be Power 5 schools, Syracuse is averaging 26 points per game. So if you look at the ESPN app or something, it's going to say they're averaging like 35 a game. It's not really true. They're really averaging 26 in real games. Clemson, though, has scored 30-plus points in every game this year. So their offense has turned it around from last year. Last year, they were a dominant defensive team who had no offense. They couldn't put points on the board to save their lives. Yeah. It's been flipped this year. Their defense has actually given up a lot of points for a Clemson defense.
I wonder why that would be.
Oh, they lose somebody, maybe?
A couple people?
Yeah. So,
sorry.
So they're now scoring points, but yet their defense is giving up points. So we have to keep that in consideration. Syracuse, against those 3 teams, giving up 19 points per game. And Syracuse is 16th in the country in red zone defense. So Syracuse can play defense. Yeah. They held NC State to 9. NC State did not have Leary, their quarterback, who's out for, is it season or 6 weeks or something like that?
I think I saw 1 to 6 weeks.
Okay. So they didn't have him. That skews things a little bit. But here's the bottom line for me. And then I'll get to your pick. But to me, Clemson is a little overvalued. So I do think they beat Syracuse, but I just don't see Clemson winning by more than 14. Yeah. I think this stays close. I think it's going to be a great game to watch. I got to take Syracuse in the points.
Yeah, I'm taking Syracuse as well. Syracuse is 5-1 against the spread, and Clemson is, I think I saw they're 4-3 against the spread. So not really covering a whole lot. And then if they don't cover this week, that drops them down to 50% on the season. We've seen that in the last few years. They find it hard to cover in these games. Yeah. So, I'm taking Syracuse.
Okay. Cincinnati is a 3-point favorite at SMU. Tanner Mordecai has been on a roll, but so has Bryant, the quarterback for Cincinnati. Both quarterbacks, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions on the season. Mordecai in the last game, I'm blanking on who they played, but I watched a lot of that game, and he just kind of wills his team. He just is.
So it was Navy.
Navy, that's right, because I thought Navy would have kept it within the spread, and they didn't. That's why I watched the game. And so, but yeah, SMU has that high-powered potential offense that can score points at will, and they kind of did against Navy. Interestingly, though, Navy made it a game at the end because they started throwing the ball.
Yeah.
Like they run that option, but then they started throwing the ball, and they actually were complete passes. SMU showed how vulnerable they are on defense, especially in their passing defense.
Yeah.
Notes here, Cincinnati, they're ranked first in the country on tackles for a loss. 9.7 tackles for loss a game. That's huge. They're ranked 19th in total defense, 78th in red zone defense. SMU is ranked 15th in total offense. And then I talked about the two quarterbacks. So that's the notes I have on the game. I think Cincinnati wins by more than 3.
Yeah, I've got Cincinnati as well. SMU, they did just beat Navy, but before that, they went on a 3-game slide where they lost to UCF 41-19, they lost to TCU 42-34, and they lost to Maryland 34-27. And actually, this game was supposed to be the game last year that we all thought was going to be, the game for the conference.
Yeah.
So,
and SMU dropped a couple right before that game at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Because we thought that was. So you got Cincinnati?
I'm taking Cincinnati.
Okay. Duke is at Miami. Miami, an 8.5-point favorite. Both quarterbacks, Leonard and Van Dyke, both have 9 touchdowns to 4 interceptions on the year. Miami squeaked by Virginia Tech last week, 20-14, and Virginia Tech's terrible. They're bad this year. They're not very good at all. And then and Duke, they lost a heartbreaker in North Carolina at the end of the game to Drake May. But they've lost the last 2 games by a combined 6 points.
Yeah.
So Duke is a better football team than their record would indicate. They did just give it up there at the end. I think North Carolina scored with like 16 seconds left to go to win the game. So that disappointing for Duke. Miami, though, we've seen flashes where Van Dyke and that offense can get things going. They seem to get a lot of yards.
Yeah.
But they just can't get the ball in the end zone. And it's just a constant struggle.
Yeah.
So I got Duke.
Both teams have lost by 3 points to North Carolina. Little more high scoring in that Duke game, but both of those defenses are a little suspect. Mm-hmm. Duke is scoring, almost about 2 more points than Miami is. When I look at this, though, 8.5 just seems like
a lot.
Just a little high.
And it went up from the open. So.
Yeah, considering Duke could make it close.
And that's kind of how I feel. It's at Miami, so I give the edge to Miami to win the game. Well, but I just think it's a close game.
Yeah, and Miami, they did just go up to Virginia Tech and win 20-14, but they were on a 3-game slide before that. Yeah. And then they lost to Texas A&M. They lost to Middle Tennessee State, and then lost to North Carolina. So,
and I will say this, even though beating Virginia Tech 20-14 seemed like, why couldn't you do any better than that? I will say this, I got to go once to a game where Miami played at Virginia Tech, and it's a rivalry for them. And it's a crazy atmosphere to be there for that game.
Well,
so
Virginia Tech lost to Old Dominion in the first game of the season. And they've only won, they've only won 2 games so far. So, not the Frank Beamer-led Virginia Tech team. But, I don't know, 8.5 just looks like a little too much because I think that Duke they have the ability to keep it within like 4 or 5 points.
Yep. You like Duke?
I like Duke.
Okay. Let's take a quick break. When we come right back, the next game we're picking, Texas, Oklahoma State. So we'll be right back.
Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action.
All right, welcome back. Let's continue with our picks. Next one up, Shaun. Texas is a 3-point favorite at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is third in the country for tackles for a loss, meaning they're getting in the backfield, they're getting pressure on the quarterback. Yeah. But really, the telling point for me is this. Sports books use a lot of factors because it's computers that determine the FPI rankings. Mm-hmm. FPI is a huge factor in spreads, how Vegas calculates this stuff. They also use like the AP poll, but it's heavily weighted for the FPI. So Texas right now is sitting around 20th in the AP.
Yeah.
That's probably about right. Anywhere from 16 to 20 is, I think, a good spot for them. I would say that they're about the 16th best team in the country. In the FPI, the ESPN FPI, which was updated this morning, they are 5th. In no way, shape, or form, if anybody watches Texas, would you think they're the 5th best team in the country? Yeah. No way. And they have 2 losses. So they're overvalued. And because the FPI is such a heavy part of setting spreads, remember last year, we said last year, Clemson. So Clemson was always in the top 4, top 3 in FPI, but they couldn't score a point to save their lives. And so during the season, it's like, man, bet against Clemson. They're overvalued, or 14 points overvalued. If you bet against Clemson, the spread's always going to be too big. Bet against the other team, you're going to win. And we did for almost 3/4 of the season.
Yeah.
Texas is overvalued. They're not the 5th best team in the country. But the FPI uses things like who they've recruited, how many 5 stars. Basically, the FPI is, when we look at you on paper, this is how good you should be. We're looking at you on paper, you should be the 5th best team in the country.
Yeah.
But they don't play like it, they're not. So that being said, the spread is overvalued in favor of Texas. So in this case, with the Texas being a 3-point favorite, really Oklahoma State should probably be about a 4-point favorite. I think there's a 7-point gap there. And so because of that, Texas being the favorite, I'm taking Oklahoma State to outright win the game.
So isn't blue chip ratio have something to do with the FPI?
It's all calculated in, yes, blue chip ratio and all that, yes. But like Texas gets 5 stars and they don't develop them, but the computer's just looking at, you got a 5-star.
Yeah.
You got a 5-star here. You recruited a 5-star here. You should be this good.
Right.
And it doesn't always work out that way. And there's several other teams in the FPI. If you look at the FPI list and you're like, what the heck? I mean, they got TCU down in the FPI, like 18 or 19th.
Yeah.
And they're clearly better than that. So with TCU, it's the opposite. It's TCU might be a 2-point underdog. Well, they should be a 5-point favorite.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that works out with the FPI and stuff. So Texas in this situation, because they're the favorite and it's such a small spread, I'm taking Oklahoma State to outright win the game. If I'm putting money on it, I'm probably putting Oklahoma State on the money line.
So there weren't. I was just looking at this last week. Quinn Ewers was 17 of 26 for 172 yards and 3 touchdowns. So not a really explosive day from his arm after, just demolishing OU the week prior. So you would think he would come out and, be able to keep rolling with that. I don't know if the injury is starting to kind of hinder him a little bit. But that game, they had 26 plays through the air, and they ran the ball 43 times. That's a lot of running compared to throwing the ball. And Bijan Robinson ran for 135. So decent, but he still was at 4.8 yards per rush. And then Roschon Johnson was 11 carries for 71 yards. My only issue here is with Oklahoma State's passing defense. They are currently 129th out of 131 schools that are eligible for these stats. So, and then Texas pass offense is 53rd. So whereas it's not just elite, top 10, top 20, it's still better than a lot of schools. So I think that Oklahoma State has a very good defensive front, but as far as the defense goes, that's about all they've got. They're very one-dimensional on the defensive side of the ball. Now, Quinn Ewers has shown the ability to pass the ball. He can make just about any play throwing the ball.
Yeah.
So
but he's still young.
Yeah.
And you have Bijan Robinson, who has been anointed the best running back in the country, which I don't believe that, but everybody says it. Everybody on every broadcast, they say he's the best in the country.
Yeah.
So they're going to run the ball. They're going to try to run the ball when they really should be throwing the ball against Oklahoma
Well,
State.
I think they will be forced to throw the ball because of defensively for Oklahoma State. They're going to stuff, those running lanes, and so they will be forced to throw the ball a lot. I doubt they'll be running the ball 43 times against Oklahoma State. They'd be stupid to do that. So, for that reason, I'm taking Texas.
Okay.
To cover 3.
Taking Texas again.
Yep.
Hey, I'm going to tell you right now, this game, I'm taking Oklahoma State. This is one of my 2 BetUS.com locks of the week.
Okay.
I'm taking it as a lock. I just feel that strongly about it. All right, let's move on. Ole Miss 2-point favorite against LSU. Ole Miss won against Auburn, didn't cover. LSU pretty much dominated Florida.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
they had that
it
game
was
handled
in the swamp.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you got to be careful because you see a team play so well, and then you're like, oh, next week they're going to win, and they don't.
Yeah.
They have a letdown. But this LSU team, what I saw against Florida, they're now starting to look like a Brian Kelly team. They're starting to offensively click.
Yeah.
They're starting to get their act together, and this could be dangerous for the rest at the SEC if LSU goes on a tear. Look, it's 2 points, and LSU doesn't lose at home very often. And if they do, it seems like it's like a 1-point loss. Ole Miss has been playing better defense than in the past, but boy, they didn't play very good defense against Auburn. And so I think LSU, I think the undefeated season ends for Ole Miss here. I like LSU to outright get the win. So this is my second BetUS.com lock of the week, LSU over Ole Miss.
So, yeah, Jaden Daniels came out and played incredibly. He was 23 of 32 against Florida for 349 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, a QBR of 93.6. And then Josh Williams, running back for LSU, had 14 carries for 106 yards. But then Jaden Daniels added 14 rushes for 44 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. So he was responsible for 6 touchdowns. I'm taking LSU to come back in good showing to their fans, that rabid fan base down there in Baton Rouge.
All right. All right, next game. UCLA is at Oregon. Oregon is a 5.5-point favorite. Listen, Oregon has been on a tear since they lost to Georgia. UCLA the wins have been incredible that they've been able to get against Utah. And, boy, this is so tough. I'm just going to say this. I will make a pick because that's what we do. But there is no way ever that I would put money on this game.
Yeah.
This is such a dead, they're so dead even. All the stats, defense, offense, everything, special teams. These teams are so even.
Their rushing yards allowed is, it's the difference of 1 yard.
Right.
So UCLA's given up 99 yards on the ground. Oregon is giving up 98. So. Right. And in both, you look at both their last 5 weeks, it's just win by a large amount, win by a large amount, win by a large amount. UCLA win by a large amount. I mean, 42-32, 40-32, 45-17, 32-31 against. We already talked about Southern Alabama or South Alabama, but then Oregon beat Arizona, Stanford, Washington State, BYU. And then Eastern Washington. Yeah. So
this feels like USC Utah 1 point either way.
Yeah.
And so 5.5 is huge. That's way huge. I'm taking UCLA just because they're the underdog. If Oregon was the underdog, I'd take Oregon.
Right.
I'm taking the underdog because I think this comes down. This might be overtime. This might be final possession. This might be a field goal to win by 1. I mean, 5.5 is huge. Anything over 2.5 is way too much of a spread in this game.
Yeah.
So you got UCLA?
I'm taking UCLA.
Okay, let's move on to Marshall against James Madison. James Madison, 11-point favorite in this game. Marshall, man, real quickly, I've been doing additional picks in addition to what we're doing here in this show. I've started a TikTok channel, In the Red Zone CFB, at TikTok. And through the week, what I'm doing is just short little videos on each game, just extra picks. So I started doing it this past week, and one of the games the first one I did on TikTok was Louisiana versus Marshall. And I think it was because of Marshall's win over Notre Dame earlier in the year, and the fact that Louisiana their stats didn't look that great, even though I hadn't really seen them play. So I picked Marshall in that game to cover, and boy, did they stink at home. Like, they were bad, and they're only 3-3. They're not very good. James Madison coming off their first loss to Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is a good football team. They beat Nebraska. They've turned things around since last year. I think it's Clay Helton is the coach there. Used to be at USC in his first year at Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern.
Oh,
Clay
okay.
Helton.
Yeah.
And so in this one, James Madison is home. They're just very good. You look at defensive ranks, they're at the top in almost all defensive categories. And I'm taking James Madison to cover 11.
Yeah, I am as well. Marshall beating Notre Dame earlier in the year maybe was a little bit of fool's gold. So they lost to Bowling Green in an overtime game. They lost to Troy 16-7. We touched on that a little bit. And they lost to Gardner-Webb, or they beat Gardner-Webb 28-7, and then lost to the Raging Cajuns out of Louisiana. And then James Madison, they did lose to Georgia Southern this last week. But, Henry Colombi was at Texas Tech, and now he's at Marshall. And I don't know if he's been injured or if they've just been trying to rotate in a new quarterback. But when I look at the stat lines for Marshall, there are – so Henry Colombi, it looks like he's kind of splitting reps with Cam Fancher, who's a freshman, and they may be doing that just to try to get their freshmen some reps. Yeah. The year's done. They're not going to win their conference. Get your freshmen in there to kind of I haven't been watching their games, so I don't know. Maybe a Marshall fan can expand on that in the
I watched
comments.
all of that Louisiana-Marshall game, and it was ugly.
So when would they bring in Fancher? Was it just
they couldn't do anything
throughout the game,
offense.
or was it Colombi just wasn't doing anything, so then they go to their freshman?
To be honest with you, I didn't even pay attention who was at quarterback. Yeah. I just know that they were awful.
Okay.
They could play a pass. They couldn't do anything.
It looks like the last 2 weeks they've been bringing in this, now 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Because they brought in Fancher against Troy, and then the overtime game, Fancher came in and threw 4 passes. So maybe they've been just slowly trying to get their freshmen kind of implemented into the game.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm taking JMU.
When you're bad, you might as well get your young guy in and get him some experience.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
So you got JMU?
Yeah.
All right, BYU is a 5-point favorite at Liberty. Liberty, we've talked about tackles for a loss. Other teams, Liberty second in the country in tackles for a loss. They play tremendous defense. They are a very, very good football team. I like BYU. I always root for BYU. I like to see them win. 5 points on the road, huge spread. I just think that's way too big because Liberty probably outright gets the win here at home. So I've got Liberty. Give me Liberty in the points for sure.
5's not all that much. I don't know. I see BYU being more than we're kind of losing our
reposition our props,
our decorations here. I'm going to take BYU.
Okay.
I don't know. It's to me that's not that much, that big of a spread. So I'll take BYU in the 5.
We're going to take one more break, and then when we come back, we got 4 more games to pick, and we'll wrap it up and be done with this show. So stick around.
Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action.
Okay, welcome back. Let's 4 more games. We're going to finish and wrap this show up, and so we can get started into Week 9. Okay, Purdue is at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a 1-point favorite. Purdue beat Nebraska this past week but did not cover. Wisconsin lost to Michigan State, a very, very bad down Michigan State. So Wisconsin already fired their coach. They won, I think, after they fired him, and then they turn around and lose again. There is no way that I'm picking Wisconsin as a favorite, even as a 1-point favorite, even as a home favorite. Purdue is a better football team than Wisconsin this year. I got Purdue all day long.
I'm taking Purdue, Wisconsin is 46th in the country in pass defense, so not bad, but probably some inconsistencies there.
Yeah.
But then Purdue is 15th in the country in pass offense. They are pretty one-dimensional, as I don't think that they run the ball very much. I was on that game, and then I switched off of it. But anyway, I just don't see Wisconsin being able to, Graham Mertz is pretty good, but he's got 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions on the year.
Yeah.
He's got 1,427 yards compared to Aiden O'Connell for Purdue, who is 1,950 yards on the year, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So a little similar in the touchdown to interception ratio. And then Wisconsin's got a receiver that has got over 700 yards receiving, Braylon Allen. But then running the ball, their rushing leader is Dyke. It's Shamir Dyke, who's a junior. He's on the year 29. Or sorry, that's reception. Receptions. So you give the running. Sorry, Braylon Allen is the running back. So 575 yards, 757. Gosh, I cannot speak right now. 8 touchdowns on the ground. So you give running the ball to Wisconsin, but you definitely give the passing game to Purdue. In Charlie Jones Sr. is the leading receiver for Purdue. He's got 62 receptions for 735 yards, 9 touchdowns. So those are just the players that kind of jump off the paper to me. But Purdue, just with the passing attack, and they're only allowing 100 yards rushing per game, so maybe they kind of keep Wisconsin's rushing attack in check, who is running the ball for 170 yards a game. You'd like to see that a little bit higher, but Purdue is throwing the ball 313 yards per game. Wisconsin just coming off of the Michigan State, a double overtime loss. So how emotionally draining was that? And Purdue has won the last 4 in a row. So give me Purdue.
Okay. Mississippi State at Alabama. Alabama is a 21.5-point favorite, and I have gone back and forth with my pick on this one.
Yeah.
Just while you were sitting here, I went back twice. Mississippi State lost to Kentucky. I didn't see that happening. I thought they would have played better on offense.
Yeah.
We know Alabama lost to Tennessee in an emotional game. They're going to come back home. Alabama always plays good at home. Although I think it was the last game at home, Texas A&M, that was a 4-point game, but they did not have Bryce Young. I've flipped back and forth because I think Mississippi State rebounds, but I also think Alabama rebounds. You give Bryce Young another week to get healthy, more practice. They're going to be salty after that loss.
Yeah.
They're going to be mad. They're going to want to put up some points. I initially picked Mississippi State. I'm going to switch that. I'm going to take Alabama to cover 21.5. I do think they come out firing. They got something to prove now. And, Nick Saban's going to be on their butts this week. He is. It's going to be a tough week of practice for Alabama.
Yeah. Alabama's 4-3 against the spread, and Mississippi State is 4-2-1.
This is not one that I would not put money on this. We have to make a pick. We're going to make a pick.
Yeah, but I do think that Alabama bounces back. We've seen Nick Saban do it time and time again. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, with the way that Kentucky was able to handle Mississippi State, I've got Alabama just kind of in an easy one here.
Okay, Minnesota is at Penn State. Penn State is a 5.5-point favorite. Penn State got rolled by Michigan. Now, Michigan's for real. That was the game I was waiting for. I was waiting for them to play a good team because I think Penn State is a good team. And Michigan just proved how good they really are.
Yeah.
But like I said, Penn State's a good team, and Minnesota lost to Illinois. Illinois is one of the better teams in the country defensively. And I picked Illinois. I said Illinois would win. It wasn't a surprise to me. But in this one, again, Minnesota's got to go on the road. That boat's taking on water, and it might be the Titanic this week when they hit Penn State. So Penn State covers 5.5. I think it could be an 8 to 10 point win, but Minnesota, that's fool's gold. They were undefeated for a while. Everybody started jumping on the bandwagon, then they lost. And they did this a few years back where they kind of went undefeated most of the year, had an absolutely ridiculous cupcake schedule.
Yeah. And
when they finally played two good teams at the end of the year, they lost. So I'm not sold on Minnesota at all. So I'll take Penn State cover 5.5.
Yeah, I'm interested in Minnesota's rush defense because Penn State seems to typically rush the ball really well. And Minnesota, I'm not seeing them.
It's not a good sign.
Yeah, well, or I just can't see. Can't talk. I must have passed them up. Oh, they are 29th in the country in rush defense.
Okay.
I believe Penn State was lower than that. Because, Big Ten, it's fairly a rushing league.
Yeah.
You have your outliers with Purdue and then Ohio State being able to do both. But I will take, how big of a letdown was that to lose to Michigan, and how much did you exert emotionally?
It's only their first loss.
That's true.
So it's not like they're out.
And it's 5.5 at home.
Right.
Yeah, I'll take the favorite here. I'll take Penn State.
Last one, Kansas State against TCU. TCU is a 5-point favorite. Bottom line, flat out, I would not put money on this game. It's just, that's a tough one to pick.
This is a really tough one.
TCU is coming off two really big emotional wins, one against Kansas that was close, came down the wire. Then they had the double overtime game against Oklahoma State. So there's an argument to be made that TCU might be kind of tired here, might be mentally drained.
Yeah.
That was the same argument I made last week for picking Syracuse over NC State. Now, NC State didn't have their quarterback, so that's a factor. But NC State had been coming off two big games against Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah. And
then they had to go to Syracuse, who was undefeated. Same situation here. Kansas State, I believe, is coming off a bye week. I don't think they played last week. And then TCU, of course, the two overtime games. So how does that factor in? TCU does have the luxury of being home, and they do have they have a few more tough games to go in the schedule, but Kansas State does too. This one, battle of undefeateds, no, Kansas State has one loss, but not in conference play to Tulane, who's top 25 now.
Yeah.
But this is a battle for the Big 12.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever wins sits atop the Big 12, essentially. So I've been on the fence with this one. I'm going to go ahead. You know what? I'm going to switch my pick. I don't do this very often. I had TCU covering 5. I'm going to switch that. I'm going to take Kansas State in the points.
I think
TCU can pull off a win, but it might be like Oklahoma State. It might be a close one, 3 points.
Was Utah-USC the game that I switched my pick this last week?
No, because I went back and watched, because I couldn't remember your picks, so I went back and watched, and you were pretty adamant about Utah. We both were.
Okay.
So
there was one I remember switching, but I can't remember which one that is. But both teams here, both teams I believe are 4-1-1 against the spread. Because they're right next to each other. So both teams coming in at 80% covering. So that doesn't really help a whole lot. this is kind of one of those ones where you kind of think like which team will have the mentality, to win this one.
Yep. This is, I believe, a primetime game too. So not quite like the 2:30 game last week. Like this one's.
Well, and it's Max Duggan going against his former team.
That's right. Adrian Martinez and his reincarnation, I guess you could say, at quarterback for Kansas State. So tough. That's why it's in primetime, though. Is it on Fox? Do you have it listed there?
It is. Let me see if I can go to full schedule and see if I can.
I didn't mark it down, so.
It doesn't say.
Okay, I'll look real quick. It's the last game of them. One of the last games listed that night. So Kansas TCU, 7 p.m. No network listed. That's odd. Pac-12. No, they don't have a network listed for it.
That means it's probably going to be.
That means Fox and ESPN's fighting over it.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But isn't Fox in baseball? They can't do primetime.
I don't know.
They don't normally do primetime games. They did USC Utah, but normally they have baseball in
I'm
October.
gonna take TCU. I think that I don't know. I put more faith in Max Duggan leading his team than Adrian Martinez. Deuce Vaughn is a heck of a running back. So, but I think that TCU giving up 135 yards on the ground per game, that's not terrible. And yeah, there's been a couple of really tough games for TCU the last couple of weeks since thrashing Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But then, Kansas State, their last game was a 10-9 game against Iowa State, who we've seen has a pretty decent defense. But I'm gonna take in Ammon G. Carter Stadium. I think that TCU covers.
Okay, that's it for our picks for Week 8 for college football. One quick note, like I mentioned earlier during the show, if you missed it, TikTok, check it out, In the Red Zone CFB. Extra picks throughout the week, just short little videos, minute or two, nothing more than that. Otherwise, if you haven't already, guys, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed. Hit the like on the video, and always leave your comment. I do read them all, even if I don't respond to everybody. And then you can check us out on the rest of social media. And don't forget to go check out betus.com. Place your bets with BetUS, every bettor's favorite sports book. So go check them out. Promo code RedZone. The link is in the description. So go check them out. Hey, guys, thank you very much. We'll see you next week for Week 9.